Divorced men of Reddit. What moment with your former wife made you think, yup, I'm asking this girl to divorce me? Story 1. After 15 years of marriage, I found some texts on her phone that made my stomach drop, completely blindsided. Up until that moment, I genuinely had no idea she was even capable of cheating. When I confronted her, she swore it was nothing. Just texts. She begged me to forgive her. I caved. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe in us, but a month later, I checked the phone bill. The messages hadn't stopped, they'd increased. I brought it up again. More begging, more promises. And still, I clung to this idea that we could fix it, that maybe, somehow, she wouldn't let everything we built fall apart. This cycle repeated for months. A new excuse every time, a fresh round of apologies, and me, still hanging on. One night, she thought I had left the house, but I caught her on the phone. She claimed it was just a friend she had gotten too close to. Nothing more. She promised to cut off contact. She swore again and again that it was never physical. Then I found the emails. They were detailed, disturbingly detailed, personal, intimate. Descriptions of his house, his life, and their encounters. When I confronted her again, she finally admitted the truth. She told me they met in the line of duty. He was a client. She was working as a visiting nurse, but of course she loved me, and she was going to fix this. Still not giving up on the act, I was done believing. Not long after, she told me she was going out with a work friend, just the bar. Might be home late, but not too late. What she didn't realize was that even though she had taken over her phone plan, she hadn't turned off Google Latitude. I could still see exactly where she went. She kissed me goodbye and drove straight to his house. I didn't lose it. Instead, I called my best friend and my father-in-law. I knew I was on the edge, and I needed someone to keep me from doing anything reckless. They showed up and grounded me. I'll love them forever for that. Her dad even offered to stay at the house and wait for her to come home so the kids wouldn't be alone. Around 3 a.m., while I was crashing at my buddy's place, she texted me asking where the heck I was. I replied with a screenshot of her little GPS dot, right at her boyfriend's house. And I told her to expect divorce papers soon. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. We were doing a trial separation at the time. Nothing finalized, no lawyers involved. She had moved into the spare bedroom, and while the word divorce had been tossed around, we were still spending time together, still sleeping together. Honestly, I wasn't thinking about ending things. I was leaning more toward counseling, trying to fix what was broken. We even talked about setting some basic ground rules during the separation. The big one, don't sleep with other people. She agreed, and even said she wanted to look into counseling too. I took that at face value. One day when I got home from work, the same time as always, I saw a random man banging my wife, whom she found on Tinder. He had no idea she was married. I kicked him out immediately, told him he had 3 minutes to be out the door or I'd knock it down, and it wouldn't be to shake hands. He left in just over 2 minutes. I didn't lose my mind, but I also didn't need to think it over anymore. Counseling. Off the table. Any hope of reconciliation, gone. I told her I'd be moving out as soon as I could, not because I wanted to give her the place, but because I couldn't afford the apartment on my own. I realized it was time to stop trying to fix something that one of us had already thrown away. Story 3. My wife at the time told me that she had called a local radio station, which often discusses hardships that military families go through and sometimes gives away $1,000 to a family in need of help. She said that she informed the radio station of my deployment and how I didn't come back the same, and she told them about our daughter, 2 months premature and only 8 months old at the time, who had numerous health problems. My wife explained to me that the radio station hadn't given away the $1,000 in quite a few weeks, so they were going to give us $10,000 for her telling such a heartfelt story. She called me while I was at work to tell me what had happened, and I was really excited. I asked my SNTOEC to help me draw up a savings plan and figure out which debts should be paid off first, etc. Things were looking up. I got home that night, and rather than being greeted with an enthusiastic hug, she points to the loft and mouths, "Not now, I'm on the phone." So I went upstairs and waited for her to finish. While I was waiting, I could hear her saying things like, "Yeah, I can get those papers to you, and no problem. I can have that ready by tomorrow. Maybe they need identification and proof of my deployment or something. Whatever. Fast forward to later that night, and like usual, I'm having trouble sleeping. I decided to get on the computer and listen to the podcast from the radio show. After a few searches, I find it and start listening to it. This is where my blood starts to boil. She told the DJs that she was a single lady living on her own and that her sister married a Marine and they had a child named Marie, our daughter's middle name. She goes on to say that Marie is now in her custody after the Marine husband was off in Afghanistan, and the mother, her real-life single sister with no kids, was off in a car wreck, and Marie was now my wife's responsibility. Hundreds of people called in and offered to help, many of whom owned businesses and wanted to offer things like baby supplies or to completely furnish a nursery for her. Thousands of people had heard this BS fabricated story, including some of my coworkers. It was the radio station she was on the phone with, and they were asking her to provide death certificates and a birth certificate for Marie, which is why I was shooed away. At that moment, I knew I was done. Story 4. I started dating a high school friend when I was 23. Just 2 months in, she who shall not be named got laid off. No big deal at first, but 6 months later, with no job, no effort to find one, and a lot of pressure from her parents, I caved and married her. Yeah, I know. Fast forward 2 years. She was 25, still unemployed, still didn't have a driver's license, and her go-to excuse was always, well, how will I get to work? Meanwhile, I was working 3 jobs to support us. She'd go out a couple of nights a week with friends, while I was pulling doubles and trying to keep up with the bills. Then came the credit card. She opened one in both our names and used it almost exclusively for shopping. I lost it when she spent over $300 on just 4 bras from Victoria's Secret. Side note, once you hit the 42DD range, apparently bras cost the same as car parts. Big racks are expensive, gentlemen. Every time I'd pay it off, she'd pile it up again. Eventually, I realized there was no changing her. And honestly, I didn't feel anything for her anymore. I was just done. So on June 1st, 2010, I paid off the credit card one last time, called the company, and closed it. I paid the rent in full, told management to take me off the lease by July 1st, and secured a new place for myself. The next day I came home to the usual scene, TV blaring, dishes piled up, laundry untouched, nothing done again. I turned off the TV, dropped my key on the table, and calmly said something like, Voldemort, I'm done. I've tried everything to make this work, and nothing's changed. Rent's paid through the month. You've got 30 days. I'm taking just my clothes. Everything else is yours. I'll be out tonight. I packed my stuff, walked out, and felt like 1,000 pounds had been lifted. About 3 miles down the road, her mom started blowing up my phone with yelling and threats. The next day, I had my attorney start the divorce paperwork. And honestly, life has been nothing but better since. That's the day I finally broke the Dark Lord's spell. Story 5. There were quite a few red flags. Honestly, she had unpredictable outbursts, and more than once her reactions to minor things were way out of proportion. But the thing that made me want a divorce was her idea of punishments. She had this strange way of handling situations she didn't like, very passive-aggressive and emotionally manipulative. The final straw came when I forgot to grab a gallon of milk on my way home from work. Just that. Instead of telling me she was upset or even just venting about it, she gave me the silent treatment for an entire week. Not one word. No good morning, no how was your day, nothing, just silence. And you know what? That week was peaceful. For the first time in ages, I felt calm. No walking on eggshells. No stress over what mood she'd be in. It was honestly the best week I'd had in that marriage. At the end of it, she finally broke the silence and asked, "Are you ready to apologize now?" I looked at her and quietly handed her the divorce papers I had already prepared. She looked stunned and asked, "Why?" "Because you robbed me of solitude but provide me with no companionship." Story 6. Not me, but one of my closest friends. I'm posting with his permission. He got a pretty solid year-end bonus from work, so he used almost the entire thing to pay off the remainder of his wife's student loans, around $14,700. And with what was left, he treated himself to a decent gaming chair, approximately $300. I happened to be staying with him over the holidays, since I had a work trip, and he lived close to the airport. On Christmas morning, everyone was in good spirits. We had breakfast, his family and in-laws came over, and we started exchanging gifts. He had gotten her a few smaller items to unwrap, but the main gift was a card letting her know her student debt was completely cleared. She opened it, stared at it for a moment in silence, and we all kind of assumed she was just overwhelmed or emotional. Then she said angrily, "Did you seriously not get me anything else? I bought you that stupid keyboard, and you only got me a few little things." For the record, it was the wrong keyboard, but he had never complained. At that point, his brother-in-law and I quietly left the room to give them space. Things escalated fast, and they had a major argument. The next day, when he drove me to the airport, he calmly told me he'd made an appointment with a divorce lawyer. He said, "If paying off someone's student loans isn't enough to be appreciated, nothing ever will be." Story 7. It had been building for years, but there was one moment that flipped the switch for me. She had lost another job. Not the first time either. She left a pretty decent position because she didn't get along with her boss, and after that, months passed where I was the one doing everything. Working full-time, cooking, laundry, dishes, yard work, the whole list. I once asked our kids what their mom did during the day, and they casually replied, "She played on the computer all day." One day when I got home from work, exhausted, and had to wash dishes just so I could make dinner, once it was ready, I called everyone to eat. She walked over, made her plate first, and ignored the fact that our youngest, who was only 4 at the time and needed help, was just standing there waiting. At that moment, I realized that if I was going to shoulder all the responsibility alone, I might as well just be alone or find someone who actually wanted to be part of a team. For context, yes, she was struggling with depression and had been in treatment for it. We even went to counseling after one of our children was born, and she had postpartum depression. At this time, she stepped out on our marriage with at least 3 guys. I finally got proof with hidden caller ID and a voice-activated tape recorder hidden under our bed. Yep, got to hear them banging. Long story, but we stayed together. The counseling did not help. There were other issues too. She wasn't great with money and had made some reckless financial decisions over the years. She would give me money for joint bills, and I was handing it back over so she could put gas in her car, or she had a bill of hers due. One year we got a nice tax refund, and she promptly told me she owed her stepdad $2,000. What the heck? But I still stayed. Story 8. Not technically divorced, but I was about a month away from getting married when everything happened. We worked at the same place for a while. She was on first shift. I was on second, but we always had weekends off together and had planned everything for the wedding. All paid for, everything set. On my birthday, I went out for a haircut before our evening plans. When I got home, I noticed a car in our apartment parking lot that looked familiar, but I didn't think much of it. She had supposedly gone up to the casino with her mom the night before and stayed over, which wasn't out of the ordinary. They were both big into gambling. I got back home, did a bit of cleaning, and then she walked in, tossed her engagement ring on the table and said, "We need to talk. I think I like Joe's more now and want to be with him. You can cancel the wedding." That was the moment it all clicked. The car I saw earlier was Joe's. She never went to the casino with her mom. She went with him. I even called her mom earlier that day to check in, and she covered for her. Found out later that Joe was an ex who had ended her previous engagement, too. He'd always acted super friendly with me, like we were buddies, which made the whole thing feel even more off. I'd sacrificed a lot for her, stood by her family when her dad passed away, supported her through everything, only to be left like I was disposable. Honestly, I don't even remember a few months after that. I was in a rough place, but thankfully my best friend of over 20 years really stepped in and helped pull me through. We went on a wild trip to clear my head, and I'll always be grateful to him and my family for getting me through it. About 6 months later, I met the woman who's now my fiancée. We've been together for over 5 years, and we just celebrated our daughter's first birthday on June 29th. I eventually quit that job too. The place had turned toxic after the breakup, with people feeling bad for her. On my last day, they refused to let me leave early to help my best friend's family with a funeral. I just dropped my stuff and walked out. When the supervisor threatened I'd get in trouble, I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Am I going to get fired?" Story 9. I worked full-time while she mostly just stayed home. One night she woke me up just to ask for an extra blanket from the bed. I figured she must be upset, and was probably sleeping on the couch. The next morning, I go looking for her and find her in the guest bed, fully bare, with another woman. I asked her what was going on, but all I got were mumbles and half responses. I told her we needed space, and we split temporarily. That weekend, I ended up at a local bar. Same bar, same dance floor. She somehow ended up at too. I naively thought she might have come to talk, to apologize, or clear the air. But no, she was there with the same woman, and when I tried to speak to her, she straight up pretended not to know me. I walked up and calmly said, "I didn't want to play any games. I just needed to know what was happening." That's when she said she didn't want to be married. I handed her back the ring right there, quietly walked away, and went to say goodbye to my friends. I was so embarrassed I couldn't even tell them what had just happened. A few minutes later, she starts making out with the other woman right in front of us, clearly trying to get a reaction. Looking back now, I think she was likely afraid to come out and didn't know how to handle it. I can understand that part. But the way she treated me, no honesty, no respect, no closure, was the part I'll never forget. We were best friends. She was the one who proposed. I genuinely thought we had a future. Now I've started over, sold most of what I owned, even changed up my whole style and wardrobe, just to feel like I was stepping into a new chapter. I lost a lot, including our dog, and way more money than I ever imagined, but I've also gained peace. I have faith in the future, and whoever I end up with next will be someone who appreciates loyalty and openness. Until then, I'm just enjoying life again. Story 10. I was in a physically, emotionally, and mentally abusive relationship with my first wife for over 6 years, 4 of which we were married. There were plenty of moments that should have ended things long before, but the final straw came shortly after I had major oral surgery. Because of a rare medical complication, I had 28 teeth removed and 2 holes drilled into my sinus cavities at the top of the back of my gums. Just 8 days after that surgery, we were in a grocery store parking lot. I asked her not to start an argument in the store because it's a small town, and I was tired of being those people, the couple everyone knows is always fighting. She then backhanded me in the mouth 6 times. At least that's how many I counted before I likely lost consciousness. The next thing I remember is waking up in the car as we pulled into our driveway, with her freaking out because my face was pressed against the window and blood was pouring from my mouth like a fountain. Story 11. We were together for 4 years, married for just over a year. I was working 2 jobs, and even considering a third, while she stayed home, unemployed. Again, it was the 5th job she'd quit in 6 months. Every time there was an issue, she bailed. "They don't respect me. Quit. This job isn't fulfilling. Quit. People are ganging up on me. Quit." Meanwhile, the house was a mess. Our young puppy was neglected, and after 10 14-hour shifts, I was still the one doing the dishes, walking the dog, and managing the laundry. She spent her days watching TV or reading, and somehow that was exhausting. One day, I called her from work to let her know I was getting out early and was excited to come home. She answers in a hushed tone and says, "I can't talk right now." Then I hear a man's voice in the background. "You can't talk right now? You don't have a job? You don't help out at home? What exactly is going on here?" She told me she needed space and was going to stay with her family to figure things out. I was blindsided, but still wanted to work through things. But the distance just gave her more freedom to bang whoever she wanted. One day, she stops by to grab some clothes, and I later realize all of her lingerie is gone. That was the moment I mentally checked out. I was done. No more being manipulated. No more one-sided effort. No more playing house while I bankroll her life. I decided I wasn't going to be her fallback anymore. Then, for her final power play, she claimed to be having self-offing thoughts and checked herself into a hospital, only to be discharged 3 days later with no actual diagnosis. I even let her keep the dog, as hard as that was. He had a yard at her family's place and other dogs to play with, while I had to move into my parents' basement with no yard and odd work hours. I've started over across the country, landed a better job, moved to a better town, and I'm now with a woman who's kind, motivated, and supportive. It was a rough ride, but I made it out, and I'm finally free from that chaos. Story 12. I'll be the first to admit, I wasn't blameless, but while I was deployed in Afghanistan, she had an affair. Unfortunately, that's not an uncommon story. At the time, I was still very religious and chose to forgive her and try to rebuild our marriage. I told her I didn't want to bring it up again and that she was forgiven, truly. But from that point forward, things were rocky. She didn't believe I had actually forgiven her, and that fear started to twist into jealousy and control. She was constantly worried I'd cheat on her out of revenge, which I never even considered. But it meant she didn't want me talking to female friends or even associating with other women in my unit. That level of mistrust and control became suffocating. I'll never be with someone that jealous again. That said, I wasn't exactly husband of the year either. Coming home from deployment, I was dealing with a lot, anger, stress, just the weight of everything. Instead of going home to work on things, I'd stop and drink in a parking lot to avoid bringing that negativity into our space. I never raised my hand or voice to her, but I knew I had a limit, and when I felt myself getting too close to it, I'd leave for a couple of days to cool off. Maybe not the healthiest way to handle it, but it was how I kept from doing something I'd regret. Eventually, I got restless and volunteered for a tour in South Korea. 1 week into that deployment, she slept with yet another man. That was the point where I was done. We married way too young, and yeah, I could have been a better husband. It made me a better man and hopefully a better partner for whoever comes next. Story 13. Not my former wife, but my fiancé. The exact moment was when we went to the bank. We'd been together over 4 years, engaged for 1.5. If circumstances had gone our way a little more than they had, we would have been married. I know it. She really was my soulmate. We connected from the moment we met each other, and through every thick and thin, the ups and the downs, we were always there for each other, understood each other. We'd been saving to buy a house together. That was the plan. Buy the house, get married, settle down, and have kids. She had a debt issue. I knew that when we first started dating, but she'd been working to pay it off, and she had, and here we were, ready to buy a house. This was our year. We went to a couple of open houses for fun to see what we could afford in our price range, to imagine ourselves living there together, snuggled up watching TV, or lying in bed with a book or breakfast in bed together. It didn't matter. Just her and me in our own home together. We went to the bank together, mostly for my own financial purposes, but when my advisor asked if we wanted to get a mortgage pre-approval, just to see what the bank said we could do, why not? We weren't going to rush into anything right away. I said yes. She clutched my leg and said no. We left. Nerves, she said. It's a big step in our lives together. The thought of going to those open houses terrified me before we did it. We were crossing that boundary between just talking about it and it's real. I let it be for a while, not a big deal, but something didn't sit right. After dinner I sat her down, asked her, nerves, she reaffirmed. I still didn't buy it. I pushed her to tell me. I knew something was up. She started to cry. If I tell you, you'll leave me. I told her I wouldn't. I couldn't. There was no money. The substantial amount of money she assured me she was saving up didn't exist. She had nothing. And not just nothing, but the money she claimed she had, she was actually in debt to the bank for the amount she told me she was in debt. For when we first started dating, that was a significantly reduced amount. I was in shock. I went into the shower and cried like a baby. Our plans never really existed. My fiancé consistently lied to me for over 4 years. I couldn't believe it. She threw away so much money to keep the lie going. She needed a new car. I told her she could afford a new one, so she went and bought a brand new one. She spent a ridiculous amount of money on me and my family for Christmas gifts, pretty much gifts for any holiday. She went big for. We even had an evening out celebration of her paying off her debt. Finally, it was supposed to mark a new beginning for our lives moving forward. It wasn't real. She even picked on my own family members who were irresponsible with their finances, with us never realizing that she was potentially even worse off. I didn't sleep on it. The next morning I helped her pack her things, and she left. I cried again, but 2 days later I asked if she wanted to meet, to work things out. She agreed. I thought I could look past it. We tried for a few more weeks, but I couldn't. I couldn't look at her the same way. I couldn't trust the words that came out of her mouth. I left for a second time. A month later, after lots of introspection and reflection, I saw her side of it, the embarrassment of revealing the debt in its true form in the first place, then the realization that the hole was dug too deep, and there's no way out. I sent her an email, asking if she wanted to talk, not to commit to anything, but to see if we could slowly rebuild what we had together. I still loved her, with my whole heart, and I wanted to make this, us, work. She agreed, and we started talking. Then the second moment came. In the few short weeks we'd been apart, she joined Tinder, which wasn't a bad thing in and of itself. But then I found out she'd been on 4 separate dates, or so she says, 3 with one guy. She hated it, she claimed. She said she compared them to me, but they weren't the same. She did it to try to ease the pain, she said. It didn't make sense to me. Couldn't she have figured that out from a single date? How did she make it to 4 before this realization kicked in? I dreamt at night of her dressed up as beautiful as she always was, but with someone who wasn't me, at a fancy restaurant, the kiss afterwards, the ride home together. I couldn't do it. She swore she never had slept with anyone, but she also swore up and down that she never had anything to hide to begin with. I couldn't do it. I couldn't trust that she was telling me the truth. And I thought I knew when she was lying, but she did such a good job pulling the wool over my eyes that I had no idea what to look for, what the signs would be. I told her I couldn't do it, and I stopped talking to her. That was a week ago. I miss her terribly. I really do. I still love her. No less than a week ago or a month ago or a year ago. I wanted us to work out so badly, but that 1-2 combo of the lying, then jumping straight to dating other men so quickly, she never even reached out, never said hi, never asked how I was doing. She isn't the same woman to me that I thought she was, and that's what's tearing me apart inside. Because in my heart, I still have my baby girl from 2 months ago, when things were perfect and I was blissfully ignorant, and that's what I want so badly. But I know it shouldn't be. The woman in my heart is gone, and I don't think she ever really existed in the first place. I don't know what hurts more, the fact that she lied, or the fact that she maybe didn't love me as much as she said she did, not enough to deter her from seeing other men. Story 14. She used to be the most fun and easygoing person I'd ever met, someone you just wanted to be around. But over the years that person slowly disappeared. She became someone angry, erratic, and unpredictable, battling serious substance issues. The turning point came when her sister showed up at my job. Not once, but twice. The first time, she just said, "You're a good man," and left. The second time, she repeated it, then added that her sister, my wife, was struggling with addiction and was involved with someone else. I didn't blow up or scream. I went home, told her I was going to fight for the kids, and left it at that. 1 week later, she emptied our savings account, took the bed, TV, and dresser, and moved out into an apartment so the kids wouldn't have to witness how bad things had gotten. That same day, I asked my mom, who had taken a week off to visit her grandkids, if she could stay a little longer. She told me she might have cancer. I just looked at her and said, "Mom, my problems are temporary. You're not. I'll help you through this." I spent the next several months sleeping on the floor in an empty, dark room, pretending everything was fine during the day so the kids wouldn't feel the chaos. At night I couldn't sleep, so I just prayed. My daughter was barely over a year old. My son was 2.5. Fast forward almost 5 years, my mom is cancer-free, I have full custody of my kids, my house is twice the size, and I'm earning twice what I used to. I made it through the darkest time of my life, and I came out stronger. I'm happy now, surrounded by people who truly care, and I love where I work. Story 15. It started when she suddenly began sleeping with her hand under the pillow, holding her phone. Then came the locked bathroom doors during showers, always taking the phone with her. One day, I simply asked what time it was and reached for her phone. She lunged at me and yanked it out of my hand like her life depended on it. Turns out she was sleeping with my college roommate. The wild part is I wasn't even trying to snoop. I could already see the call and text logs through our cell provider's online account. I just wanted the time. They're married now and have a kid together. Honestly, I'm genuinely happy for them and even more grateful to be out of that relationship. We eventually made peace and exchanged apologies. After loving someone for that long, it's hard to hold on to bitterness. We've agreed never to speak poorly of each other in front of our son, and we've both stuck to that. It's just easier to lead with peace than resentment. Story 16. For me, it was during a family vacation when I really hoped she would go to sleep, so I could spend some time with my son. That's exactly when I realized I had reached a point where I didn't want to share anything with her, not even the good moments. And honestly, that vacation just confirmed what I already suspected: we were completely disconnected. I once heard a sports journalist talk about how he and his wife treat vacations like a yearly relationship check-in. They use that time to talk about their marriage, life goals, and whether they're still aligned. It made me think maybe vacations are a good litmus test to see if you're both still in love. If you'd rather be alone than share that time with your partner, something's probably broken beyond repair. It was time to move on, not just for me, but for both of us. Slightly relevant, my last relationship was getting a bit rocky, and I was fairly sure we would be happier apart, so we took a 2-week vacation overseas. I was worried it wouldn't go too well, but we had a really great time. Did not have one disagreement the whole time. Great bang, got home. Split up amicably about a week later. It still worked out in the end, because we both had a good holiday, and now we're both happier. Story 17. It was during marriage counseling, of all places. My ex brought in a photo of me and our 4-year-old daughter lying on the couch watching Blue's Clues together. She presented it as evidence of my supposedly inappropriate behavior around the kids. I was completely stunned. Thankfully, the counselor saw right through it immediately and called her out. That moment was a turning point for me, not just because of the accusation, but because I realized she was willing to weaponize something innocent and wholesome just to gain ground. That wasn't someone I could co-parent with, let alone stay married to. I knew right then that I needed out. It's been almost 5 years since the divorce. The process wasn't exactly smooth, but no serious allegations ever made it to court. My kids are older now and becoming more aware of what's fair and what isn't. I've since remarried to someone who had children of her own, kids who already knew mine from school. Now they're all just our kids, and life is calm and full of laughter. Sometimes you hear things in passing that remind you how bad it could have been. I once overheard a woman at the store casually tell her friend, "If my ex wanted custody, I would have just said he was inappropriate with the kids." Just like that, willing to destroy a person's life over a custody battle. It reminded me how easily things could have spiraled if the wrong person had believed the wrong thing. I've seen others go through it too. Friends falsely accused of things that took months, even years, to clear up. Some lost everything. One friend had his computer seized after a false accusation. Nothing was found, of course, and he kept his cool the entire time. Eventually, he gained sole custody, remarried, and built a peaceful life for his kids. Sometimes, the quiet dignity of just holding on, doing the right thing, and walking away from chaos is the strongest move you can make. Story 18. It started when she got a new job, where her coworkers were around her age, mid to late 20s, instead of the older crowd she used to work with. Suddenly, coming home to our little family, me, our 2-year-old daughter, and the cat she insisted we get, didn't seem to interest her anymore. Instead, she was out most nights of the week, sometimes not coming home until 2 or 3 a.m., and often without any explanation. She started drinking more and made some pretty reckless decisions that thankfully never involved our daughter, but it still scared me. After about a month of this, she told me she wanted a divorce. I wasn't ready to give up. I fought for it. For 3 months, I tried everything, including counseling. The turning point for me was during one of our sessions. The counselor asked her, "In your mind, is this marriage already over?" She sat there in silence for 5 full minutes. That pause said more than words ever could. We separated the next week and finalized the divorce a year later. We're civil now, for our daughter's sake, and co-parenting the best we can. But if I'm being honest, life got better. After the initial shock and pain wore off, I realized how much weight I'd been carrying. I saved up, bought a house for my daughter and me, and created a stable, peaceful home, something I couldn't have done if I stayed in that marriage. Story 19. The last year and a half of our marriage was emotionally brutal. She became extremely controlling, isolating me from my friends, dictating where I could go, and even who I could talk to, including completely banning any conversations with women, no matter the context. Physical affection, gone. Emotional connection, non-existent. I felt less like a partner and more like a possession, just another piece of her life she could manage and manipulate. There were constant double standards, silent treatments that would last for days if I stepped out of line, and relentless verbal put-downs. The last straw for me was when she threatened to end me because I came home from work late, even though she knew I had to stay late. It didn't matter. That night she completely snapped, and I realized I was no longer safe in my own home. This was the second time this happened, and I talked with several people at work about it, and they suggested that I run. I had texts of the threats on my phone and contacted a lawyer that same week. She agreed to sign since I told her I would take severe legal action if she didn't. Thankfully, we had no children, and it was a clean divorce, and I'm happily divorced. Story 20. I always made a point never to raise my voice during arguments, which seemed to frustrate her even more. She'd escalate, yelling louder and acting more erratically while I stayed calm. One particular argument stands out as the moment everything changed for me. Our 3-year-old daughter was playing upstairs, completely unaware of the tension brewing. As I tried to de-escalate yet another argument, my ex stormed up the stairs in a fury, and at the same time our daughter was making her way down, and her mother got in her face and screamed, "God, I freaking hate you, move." My daughter came to me hurt and confused, and that was it. I knew it was over. That was over 13 years ago. My daughters are now 16 and 12. While their mom did improve in how she treats them directly, she still finds ways to use them to hurt me whenever she can. I've even taken her to court for custodial interference, but the system at the time heavily favored mothers unless you could prove severe abuse or neglect. Despite the challenges, I've done everything I can to give my daughters a stable and supportive environment when they're with me. I just want them to know what normal looks like and what respect in a home should feel like. Story 21. My ex was one hell of a disaster, yet I stood up by her and tried to work with the hand I had been dealt, so to speak, because she was my wife. I discovered she was cheating on me. I expelled her from my house. As the rage subsided, we started talking again. I convinced her to move back in, and we agreed, as she had suggested when I first confronted her, to go to therapy together. She promised never to contact the guy again. 5 months later, as I am finally facing the fact that she lies to me constantly and about all kinds of things besides the usual, not putting up with her share of the effort, expecting me to foot the bill on everything, not sharing stuff she should be sharing with her husband, etc. I discover she's talking to the guy again, so she keeps cheating, and I don't trust her word one bit. I'm done here. Now, we had a kid together, and this was in late November, so I chose to extend my misery for 7 more weeks, so I wouldn't ruin my son's Christmas. I counted the days until a January 15th when I kicked her out for good. Those weeks weren't that difficult because she had made me miserable for years, and this period at least had a clear ending date. Divorced now and still bitter about all the wasted years with that undeserving bish. Story 22. I had found signs that my wife might be cheating. Even then, I was still willing to work on the relationship. I didn't bring up the cheating right away. First, I asked her directly if she was interested in going to counseling or trying to work things out. Her answer was a flat-out no. Eventually, we entered a messy maintenance phase where we were sort of trying to fix things. I brought up the cheating, and we made a few ground rules, one of them being that she would cut ties with the guy she had been involved with. Later, I found out they were still friends on Facebook. When I calmly explained how much that hurt, she twisted it around to make me the bad guy. That's when I started crashing at a friend's place. One night, I was talking to him, half drunk, half sobbing, laying everything out. That's when it hit me. I didn't want to be with her anymore. She didn't love me, didn't respect me, and clearly didn't care, and I finally realized I deserved all those things. So I moved out, moved on, and eventually, I met someone incredible. We're getting married this April, something I never thought I'd do again. She's kind, brilliant, and emotionally mature, and we help each other grow every day. I did a complete 180 on marriage. It wasn't a struggle, it feels right. I thought long and hard after I had decided to get married, and I wanted to make sure I was not making the same mistakes again. I believe I found my true partner, and each day gives me more reasons to believe that to be true. Story 23. I didn't want a divorce when I realized her drinking was becoming a serious problem. I didn't want a divorce when she ended up comatose from liver failure, or when the hospital bills broke through the $1 million cap. Or when she came out of the coma and tried to get her life back on track. I didn't want a divorce when she became an addict. Or when she started drinking again. I didn't want a divorce when I was broke, unemployed, and hopeless. And all I could think of was how to keep food in our kitchen and my son in school. It was then that I realized that if she went back up north and lived in the same town as her large family, she could get the help necessary to get better, and I could reduce expenses and see our son graduate from high school. The moment I said, "Yup, I want a divorce," was the day she left. Her brother had come down and would drive a U-Haul back up north with her and her stuff. That day she decided that she was taking our only vehicle as well. We lived 13 miles from supermarkets, fast food, gas stations, etc., and 26 miles from my son's school. Not having a vehicle wasn't an option, so I stood my ground. She got so mad, and we fought so hard. My son got involved, screaming at her that she can't strand us, and she needed to leave right now. So she left, and I started getting back on my feet. The following year, I flew her back for her son's graduation. We were cordial, had a pretty good time, then she left. And that's the last I heard from her. Until the following year, when I was served divorce papers. We're now divorced, I've moved, and I'm back to being confident and successful. I've talked to her once or twice since then, and I'm happier than I've ever been. Story 24. I was traveling for work when things between us were already falling apart. I thought our issues were manageable, but she had already checked out and was just leading me on. We had 2 kids, had been together for 9 years, and had been married for 7. It was the worst period of my life, pure agony. The only thing that kept me going was the kids. I didn't want them to grow up in a split home, so I was willing to suffer for their sake. When I got back from a few days out of town, our dog was gone. She had given him to the neighbor, who then passed him off to a friend out of town. I spent an entire year trying to find that dog. I still think about him and hope he had a happy life in the last half, because he was a beloved part of our family. She told me she was just tired of taking care of him. This dog was smart, well-trained, and great with the kids. How can someone just do that? That's when I realized she wasn't who I thought she was. Fast forward 11 years, she's been married, divorced, remarried, and has adopted and abandoned around 15 cats and dogs over the years. They're not furniture. On the bright side, the 2 kids we have together are really well adjusted, and I have them half the time. Our custody situation is pretty good. She's a decent mom, just terrible at commitments, whether to husbands or pets. I've been remarried for 5 years now, to the most incredible woman on the planet. Looking back, I have no regrets except for losing track of that dog. I'll never forgive myself or her for that. Story 25. I'd been married for 14 years. We split up the day before our anniversary. I was tired. When I had something happen to me, it wasn't a problem. When something happened to her, it was the worst. I had a year-long cardiac issue on my end. Arrhythmia, stress tests, Holter monitors, specialist appointments, that sort of thing. On her end, one time she forgot to eat lunch and choked on some too hot food and hit her head when she passed out. Those were in her mind equivalent. That sort of imbalance became the norm. When I lost my job and admitted I was struggling mentally, her entire emotional support summed up to, just try harder. 14 years of marriage, and that's what I got. To my surprise, one day, I found out I was seriously sensitive to a medication. I passed out for a couple of days, did a lot of vomiting, my body kept throwing firmware errors when I tried to wake up, and I was more than a little disappointed when I didn't wake up in the hospital. I lost 8 pounds in a couple of days, and 5 of those pounds never really found their way back on. She was mad that I'd lost weight. She went on vacation every year with her teams and clubs. She thought of my work trips as equivalent to vacation, so I never got any time off. We only had short kid trips to the next city, and before that was our honeymoon. Conversations were a nightmare. If I phrased anything imperfectly, she'd hold it against me for years. I once tried to express that intercourse was a way for me to feel emotionally connected. She weaponized that for years with mockery. Oh, so that's how you feel love. So it was nearly impossible to say anything important about anything at all. I couldn't relax at home. I didn't feel like I could say things or do things without it being recorded, mentally and thrown back at me. It was like being on camera all the time, and it felt like she was just trying to trap me with any given conversation. She still does this, trying to get me to agree to oddly specific phrases or bringing up old issues over email after they've been resolved, like the time I caught her stealing money from the children. In the last year, she just kept asking me, weekly, daily, if I was cheating. She'd been refusing any kind of lovemaking, told me to stop asking, and when she initiated anything, I'd have to guess exactly what she wanted, no questioning from me, and any mistake ended up with her crying. It was dreadful. So I kicked my own butt to get into better shape. I lost a bunch of weight and put on a bunch of muscle. I hired a trainer from the gym, and when she had a party, I wrote it on the calendar in the kitchen, accusing me of flirting with the clerks in stores when I was there with my ex. I still remember her saying in bed that I'd gained a lot of muscle, and I was sad that she'd noticed because she really shouldn't have taken so long that she should have noticed. In counseling, she'd said that she never asked me to do any of the fitness stuff, and my inside voice was screaming, "Yes, you did," every time you said I wasn't sexy enough. I ended up losing a total of 90 pounds from the time we met to the time we split. So yes, I watched some adult movies. She was fine with it at the start, then somewhere along the line she conflated it with cheating, and eventually even soloing and cheating. The damnable thing about this is that if anyone knew much about me, you'd know how much I dislike germs. So no, I wouldn't put my lips or junk on a stranger's face and or tackle box. I tried to explain that, look, if I won't eat leftover dessert from the kids' plates, what makes you think I'd be comfortable with cheating? I discovered later that there was a very high likelihood that she had cheated on me, and more than once, I suppose, in retrospect. The conversation that started with how chlamydia can stay in the body for a long time, which should have been more of a red flag. We supposedly were each other's firsts, and at some point I developed HPV, but who knows where that came from. I suspect some of her major health issues stemmed from complications from an abortion after I'd been sterilized. In all honesty, whatever, I don't care about her anymore, other than I hope she's healthy because we share custody of our kids, and I don't want to go to her funeral until the kids are a lot older. She looks like hell though, easily up more than 300 pounds. I hope she gets better. So the final straw was when I realized that she wanted all the time in the world to fix any problem she was facing, and that I had to face all of mine alone and fix them overnight, or sooner if possible. In the morning after the last counseling session, she asked me if I thought it was okay to lie to people that you're in a relationship with. And of course, yes, some lies are acceptable. I went to the anniversary dinner alone. The waitress comped my meal. Sometime after the split, I was talking to someone online about his ex. He was beaten up on the regular, with her flailing her forearms at him, making her physical abuse look like defensive wounds, and like he'd grabbed her hard. He was only able to escape once cheap cameras were available and easily hidden. When he heard my story, he said, "Amen, brother," and it wasn't until then that I realized that my ex was an abusive cheater who kept gaslighting me. On the upside, when the divorce was finalized, the papers were ready a day early, so I went and got them and posed with the process server for a Facebook photo. It was a regular Thursday, but my American friends wondered in amazement how I got served on a holiday. We celebrate our national holiday a few days earlier up here, so I was given my divorce papers on Independence Day. Story 26. We met and spent the first 7 years of our married life on the West Coast, then moved east. 5 years later, I took a job back on the West Coast, but it was the middle of the school year, so I went out ahead and lived on my own until everyone could join me. Things hadn't been very good between us for a while, but I hadn't articulated it to her or even myself beyond vague feelings of dissatisfaction. One weekend out there on my own, I decided to take a day and drive to one of my favorite towns, a town in which I had lived long before I knew her, a town we had visited often while married. It was late afternoon and I was about to head back to my hotel when I realized that I could visit a particular beach that had special meaning to me from my earlier life there. I stopped at a convenience store, grabbed a grolsch like I used to drink on that beach, and drove out there, hiked out to a specific spot I remembered, sat down, popped the beer, and looked out over the ocean. And it hit me that I hadn't done that in over 20 years. Whenever we'd visit the area, I'd suggest stopping at the beach, but she wasn't interested and would always veto the idea. I'm sure reading this, it seems like the tiniest thing, but it was the catalyst for me realizing just how completely dissatisfied I was with our relationship. I think from the time I sat down, I knew it was over within maybe 10 minutes, just sitting there sipping my beer, looking at the ocean. Story 27. My ex and I had a pretty rocky relationship. She'd do things like cut up my clothes when I was out with friends or cut my hair while I was asleep. There were random yelling fits and occasional outbursts. We tried to do the normal couple of things to keep things together, like buying a house hoping it would help. After we moved in, the next big step was getting a cat. She absolutely loved it when it was a kitten, but as the cat grew older and more independent, being a cat, she couldn't handle it. Her attitude towards the cat became aggressive. One day, I walked in and saw her pick up the cat and throw it up toward the ceiling. The cat bounced off the ceiling, and that was the moment I threw her out of the house. I wasn't going to tolerate that kind of behavior. The cat's still with me, by the way. Story 28. This might sound dumb on the surface, but in the moment, it hit me like a truck. My ex was really into running half marathons, and she always claimed I didn't support her enough. I bent over backwards to prove otherwise. Even started running myself just to join in her passion and show I cared. But apparently, doing it wasn't enough. I had to want to do it for the right reasons. Anyway, I woke up at 4 a.m. to drive her to one of her races, because she insisted I be at every single one. I walked her to the start line like I always did. I expected, at least a thanks babe, a smile, a quick kiss, goodbye, something to acknowledge I existed. But nope, she just put her headphones on, didn't even look at me, and walked away like I was a total stranger. I actually said out loud to myself, "Oh wow, we're going to get a divorce." She fought with me because she wanted me to be at her every race. But it was not about me being there to support her running. It was about me being a chauffeur. Or maybe it was about control. I do not know really. Man, I need a hug. Story 29. For me, the final straw was at her birthday dinner with her whole family: mom, dad, sister, her husband, and their kids. We were at a mid-range restaurant, but the whole night was tense. We'd been fighting all day and even drove separately. At dinner, she refused to sit next to me. I ended up next to her niece and brother-in-law. She wouldn't even look at me the entire meal. When it was time to pay, I covered the $200 bill, and later at home, she complained I was making her dad look bad and that I should have let her family pay. Her dad is a mid-upper manager making a good salary, so I honestly didn't get how I was embarrassing him. I gave her a present, a printer she'd wanted for months, because years earlier she told me no more flowers or jewelry. I had even spent hours fixing her laptop so the printer would work. That night I was told to sleep upstairs on the couch, just me and the dog. The dog did, probably out of sympathy. After 10 years of dating, 5 months of marriage, dealing with her controlling behavior, feeling like I wasn't ever good enough, and constant fights sometimes over me taking a few days with friends in the summer, I'd had enough. She cared more about the guy she's with now than she ever did about me. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.